Hello and welcome back to the REFramework training. In the previous course, we've looked at how to build a project based on the REFramework template using Orchestrator Queue. In this series, we'll explore how to build a REFramework process where we use rows from a DataTable instead of Orchestrator Queue Items. What does that mean? In our process, we'll use the same data that we used while building projects with Orchestrator Queue, but it'll be read from an Excel file instead of an Orchestrator queue. And each row in the Excel file will be treated as a single transaction item. To create the UiDemo project with tabular data, we'll use an empty REFramework template and follow the instructions in the REFramework without queue items checklist. We'd encourage you to download the starting materials provided in this lesson and build along as you watch the videos. Our goal in this video is to learn how to fill the settings, constants, and assets sheets in the config file according to the process specifications. The configuration in UiPath Studio section of the checklist covers this part. All set? Great, let's get started. In this project, we'll get our transaction data from a local file instead of the Orchestrator queue, specifically an Excel file holding the by now familiar information, cache in, on us check, and not on us check values. The first step is to create a new process using the REFramework template and name it meaningfully. Following best practices, we'll specify the department, framework, and the business process name. We must also set the location and provide description. Then select Create. The project is now created. To perform the tasks associated with the transaction, we'll reuse the supporting workflows that we've used in the previous video. Add transaction, close, force close, and open. Before the video, you'll find the required workflows attached. Please download and use the files if you're interested in building with us. The next action is to open the project folder and add a new folder to store the supporting workflows that interact with the UiDemo application. Let's copy and paste them here in the UiDemo folder. As for the Excel file holding our transaction data, we'll move a copy inside the data folder under Input. A quick note here, when moving to production, it's best to have the input and output data stored on a shared drive. This project will not go into production, so let's go ahead with a local path. Great, now we can go back to our process and refresh the project panel. We can see the files are now available in the panel. Now that we have all of our files in place, let's start customizing the process settings in the configuration file. We'll start by setting a proper business process name. It's best to provide a relevant name so that it can later be used for logging and reporting purposes. To keep things simple and clear, we'll use the project name. Next, let's add the credentials to access the UiDemo application. Since this is sensitive information, we're going to follow best practices and avoid hard coding the username and password. As you may recall, last time we've used Orchestrator assets as robots can easily access the information and all credential type of assets are encrypted. This time, we'll use Windows Credential Manager. As a quick note, it is possible to use Tabular or other types of data for the transaction item and Orchestrator assets in the same process. However, for this example, we wanted to cover another way of handling credentials. With Credential Manager, we can manage all of the saved credentials that are used for websites, applications, and networks. It can be accessed from Control Panel, then Credential Manager. The option that we're looking for is under Windows Credentials. And here it is, add a generic credential. We'll name it UiDemo_credential. And add the username and password for the UiDemo application. These being admin and password, all lowercase. This credential will be used by the robot. Great, next let's add the path for the UiDemo executable. We'll copy it, create a new setting named UiDemo_application path. Then paste it in the value cell. Next, let's indicate the path to the transaction data source file. Since we've copied the input file to the project folder, we'll use the relative path here. We'll find it under Data, Input, and here it is, UiDemo Transactions. Please keep in mind that we've stored this file here for the purpose of the demo and building along. Ideally, for automation which we plan to place into production, we'd be using a shared drive. Great, just a few more settings left. Remember that our process had a business rule specified. Transactions with a total value of over 10,000 must be processed manually. Let's define the manual transaction threshold. We'll set this to 10,000 as per the business process requirements. Transactions above this value will trigger business rule exceptions and will be saved for manual processing. Since we're using a local file, we don't need the Orchestrator Queue Name and Orchestrator Queue Folder rows. So let's remove these. And with this, we're done with the settings sheet. Let's go to the constants sheet. Now you might remember from the previous video that we've used Orchestrator to indicate the maximum number of retries in case of a system exception. As we can see here, the max retry number is set to 0 because, by default, the template assumes that the process uses Orchestrator Queue Items. However, since we're not using queues, we must set this value manually. So let's go with a max retry number of 1. Therefore, when a transaction fails due to a system exception, it'll be retried once by the logic set in REFramework template. Do you remember the business requirement about the maximum number of consecutive system exceptions allowed? Great! In accordance with the process requirement, we must not allow more than 3 consecutive system exceptions. So, we'll set this value to 3. Previously, we discussed the constants retry number get transaction item and retry number set transaction status. To keep it simple, let's leave them at their default value. Lastly, let's set should mark job as failed constant, as we want the job to be marked as failed if there is any system exception in the initialization state. So let's set this value to true. Excellent, as we'll not be using Orchestrator at all for this process, we don't need to make any changes to the assets sheet. The configuration of our REFramework process is now complete. Let's click Save. This concludes our video on adding the details to the configuration file of the REFramework based on our process requirements. Can you tell how we configured our process differently from configuring a process using queue items? If you haven't done so already, this is a good time to review the configuration in UiPath Studio section of the REFramework without queue items checklist. Have we missed anything? Thank you for watching and happy automation!